Welcome to You Won't Hate It, where we look at life through the lens of pastors at the length of a cigar. I'm Josh.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Floyd.
I'm Joe. Thank you for the cigar, Ryan.
You are welcome. So these are, I'm trying to, like I said, I think maybe you guys have not had this cigar. So we'll see. Tell me your thoughts. But more importantly, we'll get to the podcast. Have you heard?
The bird is the word.
Yeah, it felt like that. That's the right answer.
Dang it, that was good. Have you heard of the Muscular Christianity movement?
Isn't it the Power Men?
No.
Yeah, that's
We
from
watched
Righteous
some of the same
Gemstones?
YouTube channels.
I was going to say, did you see this? I was going to ask you if you saw
I
it.
saw the thumbnail. I haven't watched the video yet.
I just watched the first
We watched the
5
same
minutes.
YouTube channel? You think that YouTube channel is the reason that you're looking for muscular Christianity?
What? No, it's the. You can tell by the thumbnail of one of the.
I watched 5 minutes of it driving in.
Because it intrigued me.
Yeah, no,
I feel like you're searching the internet for that stuff.
I watched 5 minutes of a podcast that was was about it. So I am an absolute expert on it. So 5 minutes of a podcast barely devoted to it makes me an expert. Have you even heard of it? Started in the 1890s, popularized in the 1890s.
Muscular Christianity.
It's called Muscular Christianity. It is
Isn't that the movement? Not the Mighty Men.
It's not the Power Team.
Not the Power Team.
No, it's not them.
Are they the guys that are like against trophies? I don't know if I got this right. So like in the 80s, they'd be
Jehovah's Witness?
No, these guys. Because then they would be like, they would always
participation trophies.
like kind of during the rap movement, they'd always be like dissing trophies. So I think they're the muscular dystrophy group. Nope.
No.
That was hard. That was hard on everybody.
He's so happy with himself.
I just thought we'd have you know he figured it out
no
before I got
reason.
there. I just didn't want me to figure it out. I started panicking. I was worried you guys were
You
going to...
did actually start to rush it. Yeah, you started to rush it real bad. And if anybody was listening, we would be canceled. But the good news is nobody's here.
Those
so
three
it's fine.
people don't care.
I had like 2 jokes off of that, but that's okay.
So this is started in the 1890s, fell out of fame around the war.
Whoa. Fell out of fame?
Well, apparently it got real big.
Okay.
I mean, are you going to try and... were you there in the 1890s?
He might have been.
I feel like...
1880s? I think it was 1880s. And then after the World War, they're like, we think people just got distracted and didn't care about it. It started from this movement of Joshua Hughes, I think was his name, who felt like Christianity had lost its teeth and wasn't powerful anymore and no longer was like a strong thing. Basically, he said it, which is funny. He used the term Christianity has gotten soft, which I was like, oh, you hear
That's
that
better
today.
than lost his teeth because we lost our teeth, so let's get muscles. Doesn't make as much sense as
actually
get
funny.
soft, and now we're gonna.
So
that's the dental Christian movement.
yeah,
Very
Christian.
different.
started a movement to get young men back into athletics and being physically strong as a spiritual discipline also. That's as far as I listened to. Because I got here. I do wanted to hear, because nobody was pushing against it. Basically, it was Ruslan and this other guy, and they were like, oh, yeah, I get it. And I was like, sure, but can I just ask, what does this have to do with anything? Because that's like, I don't understand.
Are they using like Paul's "I buffet my body"? So
yeah, they're trying to use all the physical analogies in Scripture, and I'm like, I think you're totally not that working out is bad, but I don't know how you use something like that and try and make it like, because at that point, can't you do that with anything? And you're like, yeah, we have the chess players club.
You know, SoulCon guys sitting right here though.
No, I know, but this is why I want to hear.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand it again. Being like, I work out and I feel close to God and it's my quiet time. Awesome. Sure. Mm-hmm. And I don't even mind saying like, yeah, one of the things I try and do is take care of my whole life holistically. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. Stewardship.
Right.
But
stewarding your body well is the term we would use.
It smacks of this like, well, if you are not in good shape, then you're not a good Christian.
They're right.
And I'm like,
they're right.
Yeah.
Besides being right,
No.
it starts to be like, no, because God needs you to do this. God makes you, and I'm like, at that point, I just feel like we're getting a little bit, because I really, as much as I'm like, God wants you to live a good, healthy life so that you're not, let's say, morbidly obese and it's difficult for you to do daily activities. I'd be like, probably, but I think you could be, and maybe I'm wrong, and I actually do want to know. I think you could probably be morbidly obese and a great Christian.
All right. I want to hear.
Right? Can I? Can you be or no? Can I be? Because I'm working towards it. That's why I'm asking.
I did have a half a jar of peanut butter before this episode, so.
Peanut butter is so good.
It's so good. Yeah. All right. Look, I think you should have the floor. You start with this. What do you think? And explain what SoulCon is, why we're giving you the floor.
So I'm the executive director of SoulCon, which is an international men's ministry that uses physical and nutritional disciplines to help identify the voice of the flesh so that you can more easily identify the voice of the spirit.
Okay, that went really fast. Help identify. So connect those for me again. Why?
So the idea is we use fasting and exercise to cause your flesh to cry out in order to identify that voice so that it helps you more clearly delineate between the voice of the flesh and the voice of the spirit, so that when you're hearing go do something or don't do something, you can more clearly identify whether it's God or you're just being a sissy.
You can determine.
I mean, I want to unpack this real quick.
By putting yourself through physical pain.
You're exhausted, so now you get yourself completely destroyed physically.
We don't do anything that far.
No. I'm really thinking through
I'm trying to play too.
Because we did. It's called Joshua. Camp Joshua Tree.
Joshua
Tree. No, it's a
YouTube album.
No, Red. Never mind. It was at Hume Lake Christian Camp. Most of you guys know that. They had an extreme sport.
Yeah, their ropes course.
What's it called?
Rappelling.
No, a whole separate camp.
Oh, really?
It was a camp, and it's Joshua something, which is funny because I worked there and I can't remember it. But it was hardcore whitewater rafting, rock climbing, rappelling, really intense hikes. And the whole point was to break. So theirs was similar, but here's the tweak that it sounds different. It was to break you down and basically wear you out so bad that you're like,
what am I relying on?
I'm so spent. And at the end of the night, you're basically laying by a campfire. And then we talk about God. And it was almost like this is more of your true self, because if you're mentally and physically and emotionally exhausted, you can't put up walls anymore. You don't have the energy to put up a wall of what you're struggling with and pretend like you're a good person. Right. So we would spend a week and just destroy ourselves. And it was, I was one of the counselors.
Brainwashing them about things.
100%. That's actually where I got my worst concussion ever. Oh, and it was doing a skit for the kids at camp.
Yeah, you overcommitted.
I got clotheslined and knocked out cold, and it was hilarious. Anyway.
All right. So you were just explaining. We were asking you.
Explain the difference of.
How do you hear the voice of the flesh versus the voice of the spirit?
Yeah. And one thing that I was saying was, we really focus on the disciplines, like building a discipline, a daily discipline of, like, it starts with the Lord's Prayer on your knees every morning.
And I do like.
Literally on your knees?
Literally on your knees.
Okay. Good.
And then 40 push-ups. And then that's how you start your day, every day. And that part is just about building disciplines.
Why are you grinning so much? Why are you grinning so much?
Lots of reasons.
And then from there, there's a daily devotional. We encourage, time in the Word. There's all of those things. That are, typical spiritual disciplines, time in prayer.
But outside of...
there's daily challenges.
Outside of upping your discipline game, of like... Because the more disciplined I am with my diet, the more disciplined I'm probably going to be with my spirituality. Yeah. Outside of the discipline aspect, what is the... And that's enough. So I'm not saying it's enough.
Sure.
But what is what you were saying about, like, it makes it easier to hear the voice of God or distinguish the voice of God?
Distinguish. I would use the word distinguish because a lot of times one of the things that we hear a lot, especially in men's ministry, is how do I know that that's God saying that and not just me?
Okay.
Right.
And so it's being able to identify the voice that is me so that I can more clearly identify when God is actually speaking.
I feel like I'm being stupid. How do you know it's how do you know it's you? How does working out tell me my voice?
Because you're pushing, the idea is you're pushing yourself to a point where, because God doesn't care if you work out. So the consistency of doing it every day, day after day after day after day, and the nutrition, and I really want a donut, and those kind of things, you
Donuts are holy.
Are able to identify The
of
it's
frame.
totally off camera.
It's going to look perfect. It's going to line up perfect.
The being able to identify that voice, you know what you sound like.
So it's kind of like, it's like fasting, where you're like,
Yeah,
you're
there's-
hungry, because that way you're just like,
So it makes
do-
you hunger
there's
for
a-
the spirit, though.
And there's
Wait.
there's a
God?
fast in it as well.
I don't.
Even in the base challenge, there's a 30-hour fast from dinner.
Is it
one
based
night
out of the
before-
First Corinthians, the one that you referred to me in regards to running?
running the race.
Where I discipline my body so I won't be disqualified.
He said
buffet
buffet.
my body.
That comes up. That's King
Do
James.
not like that term.
Buffett's my
King
favorite
James.
for some reason.
Yeah.
It's pronounced buffet.
Jimmy Buffett?
It's-
I buffet my body.
I Jimmy my body.
Yeah, you guys are screwing it up. He's going to an all-you-can-eat Roman buffet.
So he's not disqualified.
It's not right.
And I am not trying to be a jerk.
Well,
Because what
I
they're
don't have
doing
to-
is
You
good.
don't have to try.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Right?
Yeah, and what
I
you
don't
guys are doing is
understand.
clearly good. I'm just not
Oh, no,
sure.
it's
I'm
awesome.
not
It's
sure
made
I'm
a
getting.
massive difference in guys' lives. I'm seeing it as the discipline aspect of life in general is incredibly healthy for any individual, as opposed to being lazy. That's literally what we're talking about. So it's fantastic. I don't understand how it helps me distinguish my voice versus
I'm going to
God's
try
voice.
because I think I know.
maybe that's just for me. Maybe that would not be every man's experience, but for
Okay.
me, it helped me with that.
Let me try. Is it like I understand my will? Because I'm thinking like where my will comes in, and like I'm too tired. I don't want to do this. I don't
Right.
want to eat. Like so, maybe I understand like my will to push through
Well,
versus
there's-
actually then try to hear the Holy Spirit what He wants me to do.
Even the name of the organization, the name of the ministry is SoulCon, and it's short for soul control. And it literally is getting control over your mind, will, and emotions.
I never knew it was soul control.
Is the idea, is the concept.
Yeah.
And another aspect that's huge for men is that it gets them into community because you're doing this with a group of guys from all over the
100%.
country, all over the world.
Sure.
We have weekly Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
There's devotionals that every guy is reading every morning. The app,
It's
they're posting on the
remarkable
community page.
what it's done for just the guys that I know.
Sure. Yeah.
And it makes, especially in a culture where being a young man is very difficult to make new friends. They've done study after study that it's more and more lonely to be a man in today's society. Those aspects, I'm like, dude, I am 100% in. I'm sold on the program. I think it's awesome. I just still, and not in a bad way. And this is why I'm not challenging anything. I just am trying to figure out how me being disciplined and then hearing like, oh my gosh, this is really tough. Like I want to quit, but I'm going to push through helps me distinguish why that's different from God.
And again,
I'm just curious.
that could be just me.
Okay.
Because where I was at when I started SoulCon in 2019, I was in a pretty rough space. I was on the journey back to faith. I was a couple years in, but I was struggling with community, and then also I think that for me, I got into community there for the first time since my return, and so for me I was able to hear God not only in my, because I've told you guys before, like I feel like God speaks to me more freely and openly when I'm working out than at any other time.
Sure.
And I think that's just
Usually
because,
pretty harsh comments though. That's the negative
like,
part.
you pansy.
Yeah, your form is a joke.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's terrible.
And you wonder why you blew your knee out.
Yeah,
right?
that's absolutely.
Stepping on a rock.
Here's the part I think is neat. No matter what, obviously, you're
that's
disciplining
the
yourself
case. Yeah,
spiritually,
yeah.
you're disciplining yourself physically, nutritionally.
Fantastic.
And I could imagine, even disciplining yourself spiritually, you're going to be able to hear, start to learn how to connect with the Holy Spirit. So it's really good stuff. How does this fit in with Christian muscles?
Muscular Christianity.
It's not how it goes. There's a different word.
No, I was only asking what you guys thought about this move, because according to them, and again, this is the I feel like the bane of everyone watching this podcast is week after week. I'm like, hey, here's a topic. I know nothing about it. Let's talk about it. No, you guys don't either. Let's talk about it. But it's kind of fun.
Even hearing the name makes you want to talk about it. Like,
So that's what I thought too. That's why I was like, I don't really need to listen to it. I probably do. There's probably details that I'm totally missing. But it was just this thought of the way the guy was talking in the 5 minutes I heard him on the drive in. It was very much this idea of like, oh yeah, in order to be a good Christian, you should be.
and it's not gender specific, right? This was men and women.
I know I think it's pretty gender specific, to be honest with
It's
you.
men.
I think it's just men.
So basically, in the 1890s, men weren't manly enough that were Christians.
Yes, the 1890s, it spawned out of this part I did here. It spawned out of this one dude thinking that Christianity had lost its teeth and it became soft, and that men weren't devoting themselves to anything, so they were just soft Christians.
I like that your voice cracked on men. That was, that was really,
I love like the 1890s where I feel like it's like the manly generation. It's like you're gonna die if you're not manly.
Well, that's what's funny. And so, but it was just that thought of, because I don't know if I would even make a statement to men today in general, like men today are too soft, because I'm like, I know some of the toughest, studliest dudes ever right now. And so
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Obesity is an issue in America.
Obesity is an
and
issue
it's starting to become global.
But what does that
it
have?
has been for a long time, because even in World War One, I get them all confused. There were not. I know. And give us a minute though. It'll be another one. There was not a. That was a terrible thing to say. There was not enough qualified men that could go that would qualify for the draft. So they started they shifted the nutritional campaign in the 40s to try to get people to eat more protein, because there were a lot of guys that couldn't qualify for the draft.
Yeah, that was World War II.
World War II.
So here's what's weird though.
World War I was...
And I do find this interesting, is that instead of bolstering the people that they wanted to enlist, they lowered the standards. Yeah. So I'm like...
Yes, because they had to, because there was no way to get around it, because you're not going to make an impact within the amount of time.
But isn't that interesting? So, there's probably 50 correlations we can make with Christianity in that.
Yeah.
But do you think...
In our hiring practices, is that the way you're going to go with it?
Do you think your physical health and shape matters to your Christian walk at all?
Besides testimony,
I'd like to hear your
move
thoughts.
it from testimony, right? Because it sounds like he's talking about testimony. So are you not?
I didn't hear anything about testimony.
Well, because he's saying that Christianity's lost its teeth or it's become soft. I usually think of that as observational from others looking at us.
Oh,
there's nothing to follow.
I didn't hear anything directed to that, but
that's how I'm implying it from him.
Sorry about that. That could be a
there's nothing to follow.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna.
Do you want to follow Jesus like a wuss, or do you want to follow Jesus like a man?
Probably talked about that at minute 7.
That's probably true. I'm just gonna keep straw manning this.
I honestly, I don't think that your physical condition has anything to do with your spiritual condition.
Oh man, that's a cool statement, but I don't know if I agree with it.
Well,
that's the hard part.
Not because I think it just hits you, and I'm like, does it?
I say this predicated on like my grandmother. My grandmother at the time, she was, but her physical condition leading up to this, she was in her 90s. Couldn't do much.
So I'm not talking about a health complication. Sure. I'm talking about a fully able-bodied person,
25 years old,
who has let themselves go.
Man or woman, 25 years old, and you just kind of said, nope, I'm not going to carry all about my physical
question would be on the other side, because this
why you got
because
there?
of evidence
how you let
for
yourself
me.
Get there?
Yeah, how messed up are you spiritually and emotionally that you allow yourself to get to that point physically?
And
that was my case.
I'm genuinely asking, is there spiritually I'm doing fantastic. God and I are great. Testimony's awesome. I just love pasta and I hate working out and I've become obese. Is that... And I really want to know, because I keep pushing it, to be honest with you, I keep pushing it to where it's like, obviously the two aren't connected, obviously. And then every time I'm like,
but are they?
Sure feels like they. And I'm just intrigued by it.
Could you be good spiritually with God, but just bad emotionally with yourself? And
Is
so
that
a lot
possible?
of your eating and exercise, because you're depressed.
Yes.
Let's just go with, I love the Lord, but I'm depressed.
Is it possible to be mentally, emotionally, and physically
in a bad spot,
but spiritually well? Is that even is that a thing?
When David was depressed, was he in a bad place spiritually?
Sure.
Just wonder. And then how long does that last? Like if that's for 10 years.
I'm sure.
Even were his words in the Psalms. Because a lot of those aren't great.
Yeah, some of them are horrible.
Like you read some and you're like, that doesn't feel right as a
So
Christian to say those things.
I can
but-
only be good with God when I'm on the mountaintop. I can't be good with God when I'm in the valley.
that's what I want to hear. Like, is it?
I don't know that there's a direct correlation. Like, I wouldn't say that somebody that is overweight is necessarily in a poor spiritual condition.
Well, I hope not.
I would say that.
Well, especially the America's BMI chart.
Yeah,
we're all overweight.
I hate BMI.
I was going to say this table's BMI.
Yeah, TMI.
Except
Josh is probably.
I curve us.
Josh is curved in the right direction.
But I will say that the healthier that you are spiritually, that probably should affect you emotionally and then eventually physically.
I think
right?
it does.
For most
So the
think it does
question
in
is,
your-
can you be depressed and still in right standing with God?
This is now going towards mental
Yes,
health.
because
I'm talking about mental,
because-
emotional.
Because we're kind of
like-
saying the physical part is becoming maybe connected
Well, so
to
we're-
emotional
well,
health.
But
if we're
basically
making that-
everything but spiritual, the whole holistic thing
Right.
but spirituality. Is there a way to be emotionally poor or physically poor but still spiritually well?
I think so, but I think in the idea of being a living sacrifice, not. If we're making a correlation between mental health and physical health, that's obvious and that's
right.
easy to do. Between the spiritual health, I can definitely see that. I think the idea of, and it could be my Lutheran upbringing, like the concept of slothfulness and gluttony.
Yeah.
I think, but also in relating it to modern day Christians versus those who this was, at the time in the first century, that it wasn't as. People weren't going to gyms. There was working out. There was training. There was physical training in different sports at the time.
They sure ate a lot.
And there was
better.
also a lot of hunting
Just a
and
lot
battle.
less-
more holistically.
But they're
But it's funny, and they lived way
but their physical
shorter amounts of time.
physical fitness for the first century civilizations and ancient civilizations was for hunting, for battle, for game. So it was a matter of like their effectiveness. And I think
The only people who were obese were like the ruling class who
Those-
could
the
sit
ruling-
around,
yeah.
do nothing, and
So
eat.
those
That's
didn't
it.
have to work, basically.
it's possible that you can see, and I don't know if it's because, but I don't think it's coincidental that they were probably spiritually bankrupt.
Interesting.
Oftentimes. Yeah.
Oftentimes.
Interesting.
Is
They
it-
definitely were. You're
Yeah.
right.
I don't know which one drives the other.
I know. I'm struggling because I want to say they
I'm
can't
trying to
correlate,
be-
But each of us have had bouts with depression. And that doesn't mean that we were in necessarily a negative spiritual space.
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying
But I
to
think
place.
I
I
think
was in
it
a
is.
desperate spiritual space, though. I wasn't in this, I don't want you, God. I was in this, I need you, God. when I was in a
Right.
bad
Cause or
spot.
effect.
Right.
Yeah, so I think I'm almost like, obviously in a valley, crying out to God. You're depressed, you're struggling, your weight is bad, your emotions bad, all that stuff. But you're still like trying to connect with God. Seems different than I'm a bad steward of my body and I don't care. Me and God are cool. That seems different to me. Then you're
Sure.
just like, yeah, I'm fine. Like,
I do everything else fine.
Yeah.
I just don't watch what I eat and I don't work out.
Right. I don't really.
And I sit around because my job is sedentary. Like
yeah, or because I've made a lot of money and now I don't want to work.
or I mean,
And there are guys that can not watch what they eat and not work out and still look like physical specimens.
well, I wouldn't call myself a specimen, but thank
I
you.
wouldn't either.
I appreciate it.
How about this? Let me reverse it.
I hate the cigar, by the way.
I like it.
It's not good. It's,
I like it.
it's
Do
getting
not
bitter.
like it.
All of you just set
a little
them on the
bitter.
here, and Josh and I'll finish them.
It's actually it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't like it at all.
It's
That's-
still a cigar.
How about this? Doing the reverse. Could you? Is it possible to be just in an amazing place with God? Right? I know it's not that much reverse, but I'm just trying to think of the other one. So going with the depressed now. I'm in an amazing spot with God. Every person I think who has a great, great relationship with God, are they emotionally, physically in good shape?
yeah.
Well, and the
And
opposite.
mentally.
And
How
then
do you quantify?
Do what I say that? Like,
well,
I
and
met
then
people
the
like
other
that?
side of
four.
that coin, if just because somebody's fat and lethargic, does that mean that they're
Yeah, I'm trying to find the person. I'm even trying to think.
I don't think so.
Anecdotally.
Hold on,
But I don't-
let's tackle those because I think those are two separate things. It seems like the opposite, but you're right. They're
Yeah,
different.
I'm going in the.
So
I'm in an amazing spot with God.
Can you be spiritually the best ever,
Yeah,
but terrible on any of the other three?
yeah.
Is it even possible?
Yes.
Could you just be this person like, man, me and God
Yes.
are so good. I just really get
Because what is
depressed, or I just really don't like to work out.
What are we quantifying when we're saying the best spiritually? Saying that you're edifying and proselytizing to everyone you know.
No, I think it's more arbitrary for sure. I don't know if we can
'Cause
pinpoint it.
it's
I would
like-
just think for yourself what that would be. So it's like
Some joy at least, right? When
it's the
joy,
same structure
peace.
that we have at this church. It's like Joe and I
So we're talking about their fruits.
And then our ministry and counsel. That's the level of spirituality in our churches according to what seat you hold.
We'll show you the org chart.
Yeah, we have a spiritual org
down
chart.
the totem pole.
We have a spiritual org chart coming out.
How about the fruits of the Spirit? Are they living out the fruits of the Spirit? Just make it as simple as that.
Right.
The fruits of the
Well,
Spirit are present in their
self-control.
life.
Self-control.
Yeah.
So that would be that'd be at least on the overeating.
Wait, what if it's hold on? What if you do have total self-control? So we know there's no way around it. Genetics play a large part.
Right. I would say glandular genetics.
I
stuff like
have
that.
no thyroid.
Yes.
I have no.
Right?
I have no thighs.
I have,
You know what that felt like in Frozen? Where he's like, I have no bones. That was like the best.
I just get frustrated at times when people say that genetics do play a role in how much of a specimen you can become.
Sure.
Sure.
But even without a thyroid, I have lost 100 and something pounds.
Right.
Sure, but you're in all honesty, I mean somebody could be
What are you gonna say?
somebody could be 50 pounds overweight
Okay.
and like that like it sounds weird, but genetically
Sure.
they can keep working. I know people who work out a hefty amount and eat pretty darn well and remain pretty big.
And you
How
can
is their,
look.
how
I
is
mean,
their spiritual life? How is their relationship with Christ?
terrible?
I was going to swear.
Yeah.
Crappy is what I was going to say.
And I think
I was just kidding. That's not true.
We can't. I think
It sounds like a dumb conversation, but it's interesting.
It is an interesting conversation because you're looking at the results and going like, all right, is this a
judging.
means to an end? So it's like,
Or where
someone could be
somebody is
physically
at
fit
now.
and it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're physically fit because for various intentions and motivations. But when you tie that in from, the superficial of like I want to look good to I want to feel good, it's like, well, I feel the best. I feel the best when I'm in relationship with Christ, and that will that motivation, it inspires you in some way. And so when I'm working out now, it is like this kind of added on motivation of like, I do this all for you, Lord. Everything I'm going to do, I want to glorify you in as mundial or I don't know the word as rudimentary as simple as it is.
I know the word isn't mundial.
Whatever it is, yeah.
I know that.
It's Christian Dior, but mundane.
It's
Mundane, thank you.
Mundane
Thank you.
Dior plus
So I think the idea of like, you could look at the results in that way. I think it's more the matter, the intent. It goes
Which
to
you're looking
intention
at
of the
which way
heart.
the arrow's
Could it-
pointing.
I
kind of
do think
kind of which
that's
way the arrow's pointing.
interesting that you could be in poor physical shape, but you're working towards. So
Well, and
so
could
the
it-
snapshot that we have is probably not a good indicator. I like that a lot.
And could it be that the level of physical health is as arbitrary individually as the level of spiritual health?
Yeah.
Because
I don't
wouldn't-
think I've ever met a person, and I'm just trying to be honest with myself, I don't think I've ever met a person who I thought they are a rock star believer,
Okay.
and I cared at all what they looked like.
Oh, okay.
I know you thought
I thought you were gonna go another
I know you
way.
both thought I was going to go, but I'm
And I
thinking
had
like
names
But I'm
ready to
thinking like because
fire up.
once that kind of light shines,
Have you ever met a rock star believer?
Yeah, awesome. John Shabaglan. So I'm trying to think like when that light shines, I don't think any of the other parts seem to stand out. I think when it's happening when you meet somebody and that whole dimness and what they're just trying to figure it out spiritually, then you're kind of evaluating all parts of life. Like maybe it's what you're eating, maybe you're just trying to help all these different ways, maybe it's your prayer life. But when I meet someone who's just like, man, they're just on fire for Jesus, I don't really know if any of those other parts would ever matter to me. It's just like, oh man.
I'm just so intrigued. This has gotten super convoluted as I imagined it would. But it's just intriguing to me that any of us as Christians would put a ton of attention and effort into the physical self if the spiritual self isn't really strong. It's not that I think you could be a really strong Christian and be like, yeah, and now I'm focusing on my health a ton because I love it. It's
Or
fun.
what if you're like kind of a Pharisee and you're just good at all about stewardship? So you're ripped and you're in great shape, but you kind of have this hard heart.
Sure, but I don't even like. I'm trying to. That's what I'm saying. That's what I mean by it keeps getting so convoluted. We can go down a million channels, which I love doing, but I keep getting back to as a Christian. Like I'm in this great place with the Lord. I love the Lord. It's when we mingle the two. That's I think what it is. It feels a little bit like when we take politics and Christianity and try and marry them, and we get these Christian nationalists. Because I'm like, those two things were never meant to be together. it's not bad or wrong if you're a Christian and you care about politics and you bring your Christianity into politics. I don't think that's wrong at all.
I don't necessarily agree with the analogy, though, because I think Christ created us not to be political beings, but he did create us as spiritual beings that have a human existence. And part of the Christian life includes the body that we live in. And there is a natural marrying of the two.
Where it doesn't necessarily have the political commingling the same way.
Right, because you weren't made
Right.
to be a political being.
But we
I
were
think-
born into a political structure.
Right. I can't get over the idea of anything more than stewardship.
Yeah.
I can't get past that. Like anything more than like steward your body well, steward your mental health well. Anything more than that, I can't make a connection because I feel like we're dancing around the idea of it's just simply stewardship. Like
Yeah.
if in any of the arenas, just name it outside of your spirit, that like when you're in a good spot with God, that you're saying, then you feel the conviction of the Holy Spirit to be like, hey, I should probably steward, and it'll look different for everybody, right? Based on genetics, based on opportunity,
And we may have seasons where we focus more on the stewardship of our physical body. Sometimes we'll focus more on the stewardship of our mental health.
or our kids. Maybe you're in a season where you got little kids.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't get to the
Right.
gym.
Right,
I'm like, I've
exactly,
got little kids, or
So I put on 15 pounds, but I was being a good father versus
or I'm 45 and now I need to be at the gym 9 hours a day, which is to try and even keep up with the descending metabolism. And so now somebody else is being like, well, look at you, not in good shape. I'm like, do you mean me trying to eat good every day and going to the gym 3 days a week? And and you're judging me by how I'm like,
And I
I'm
have
actually
7
trying.
kids. And
It kind of
trying
brings to mind, like, how absolutely monstrous do you think Samson was?
So interesting.
And it's
how
like,
that
and
came to
as a
mind,
kid, well, just because we're talking about our relationship, spirituality, like, he was faithful, and he's calling on God to strengthen him in these dire moments.
You know what's
and
weird,
holding
though?
up the temple, and
But
it's like
I'm not saying this is the case. I wonder
the jawbone of a donkey.
if his strength came from the spirit.
Right.
So physically he was super normal. That to me is funny to think about.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because his strength
so he
was
looked like Spider-Man.
It was a spiritual gift. It wasn't necessarily I got yoked, then I had strength.
I just love that
'Cause
all depictions of him.
Because some of the things,
obviously,
How can you
some
not?
of the
should depict
things
him that
wouldn't
way.
have been as miraculous if he was this specimen of a man.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny to think like he's just this little dude. who
Josh,
just
but
is
even
dominating.
if he was, and I conquer a whole army with a bone.
Yeah, I was already thinking like, no matter how yoked he is, there's nothing that was gonna be like he pushed down the pillar in a temple and collapsed it. Like that, there's no amount of yoked you are that you're like,
That's so
that's
cool.
even possible.
It's
I wish
so
I had
fun.
their cameras so I could like go into their shots. And then, anyway,
That's such a weird
Oh,
story.
right, your hands just enter into our shot.
And what's funny is I obviously for you to judge somebody else is stupid. Wherever
We
they're
already know
at in
that.
their walk, that's weird. It's more of the looking inward, thinking about yourself. I'm like,
Yeah.
that is such an interesting thought.
what are the tenets of the
Muscular Christianity?
Muscular Christianity?
Protein.
He listened to 5 minutes, dude.
literally 5 minutes? I wish
okay.
I had more for you. I'm
Well,
so
and the
sorry.
idea of it is like the fact that it's exclusive to men.
So
is
the
interesting.
1880s one was I don't know about today.
Yeah.
But
Maybe
wasn't
they've-
everything in the 1880s exclusive
Exactly.
to
That's
men?
why I'm kind of like, maybe they've expanded it today. But apparently, and this started because this is what the dude said, is that there's been a large explosion of growth again. He wrote a book on it, and it kind of blew up because of young men clamoring. It's the reason Jordan Peterson has become such a worldwide name, is because young men are clamoring for more purpose. So if you give somebody, especially young men, you give somebody an outlet and a very specific thing to do that is,
Right.
masculine, quote unquote, then that helps in every other regard as well. Ruslan made a comment where he said he sees it as a good outlet for a young man for their testosterone. Your hormones are raging. You've got all this testosterone. Your outlet, it has to go to something. So it should be going to sports and athletics and physical well-being. That way, that's an outlet. So you're not raging the rest of your life. And I was like, well, that's a good
yeah,
point, too.
I think it.
Oh, there's like several books.
I think it
Yeah,
does.
no, it's a big deal now.
Well, the first tenet is body negative.
Hey, look at that. Look at that picture of Jesus.
So it's like
Body negative.
That's
like Gnosticism.
What the heck?
It's like a picture of Jesus. all yoked.
Gnosticism
That's a
and
yoked Jesus.
He's casually yoked.
Yeah.
Casually,
and,
just chilling.
I think Platoism. There's a couple of those that are like the body is bad and the spirit's good. Right?
Yeah, there was a
That's
push.
actually, it's Gnosticism.
Gnosticism and
yeah.
Okay, so this says characterized by a belief in patriotic duty.
Okay,
discipline,
okay. This just
self-sacrifice,
ruined
masculinity,
all right.
and the moral and physical beauty.
It's funny, I went the other way. I was like, yeah, you guys are all good. I'm like, yeah, there it is.
right.
Finally, somebody's saying it.
An eagle swoops in.
If we're supposed to be like Jesus, this may be completely reaching. Hawk screech in place because the
Every time you do a rep.
because the actual eagle sound is.
Yeah,
You ever heard
right,
the eagle?
yeah.
Actual eagle is like.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm stretching this verse, but if we're supposed to be like Jesus, right? And there was nothing in him that we would desire him, in Isaiah. Is that then we're along lines and then lift him up and he'll draw people to himself. So even if we're saying this as testimony, maybe I'm reaching on this. Should that be like the physical part should only be a natural outworking of stewardship and not a goal?
I think so.
Yeah, I was raised much more in the way of this whole world passes. Everything physical in this world passes away.
You haven't departed from it.
So you're right. So your physical being isn't important, but there are disciplines that you should have that are far-reaching. There's a work ethic. There's just taking care of yourself so that you're
taking care of your
worth something to your
finances,
family.
like you spend wisely.
Taking care of your finances, like.
Yeah.
Feels like that all falls into a category.
So it's
somebody
funny,
wants to be
though,
like specifically working out.
Because I take that, I don't know, and I might be just complicating this like crazy. Because it seems like all that I'm like, yes, I agree with it. I just don't like when they start getting commingled again, like Christian nationalism, where I'm like, I feel like we're making it that if you're a good Christian, then you have to be in good shape. And I'm like, I don't know. That might be true. It very well might be. It just doesn't feel right.
We know, like, just based on history and science, that some of the most absolutely muscular specimens of men were in horrible physical condition. Like, they weren't physically healthy, even though their body was.
They were shaping it for a look.
Injuries and all
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Ronnie Coleman is the best
Ronnie
example.
Coleman,
Yeah,
great
he's-
example.
Even then,
guy.
in stewardship, wouldn't it be about the idea of being faithful to eat good and work out as opposed to being faithful to look a certain way?
Well, I would say eat well, only because that's proper English. But
No, thank you.
yeah, it's such a weird, and I feel like it is getting.
I do like to picture Paul boxing, though.
Yeah, buffeting his ears.
Stop doing it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There is something to that passage.
we solved
though.
nothing again.
I don't.
I know, and I feel like
Is there
halfway-
a level of physical unhealth though where you become disqualified for ministry?
Oh, that's interesting. That was the one somebody was saying. I think it was you or
C.S.
somebody
Lewis?
else. Was it C.S. Lewis?
Talked about the guy chastised him for drinking and
Yeah.
smoking.
Oh,
a
that's right.
cigar.
That was Mere Christianity. Yeah. And he said he was morbidly obese.
Went down to the other guy and said,
Yeah.
I think you need to kind of.
Yeah.
Well, that's the epitome of Paul's passage. I buffet my body so that once I have preached the gospel, I may not be considered disqualified.
Well, the epitome is about it, but that was a spiritual truth. He was saying like it was. He was likening. It was a simile. He was likening it to something.
Yeah.
But I do think this is maybe just weird, but I do think if someone showed up and they're like, "Hey, we want to be a pastor here," and we thought any one part of their life, the way they handled their money, the way their physical body was, the way their emotional situation was, they're just out of control and they're not doing anything to steward that, we'd be like, "Hey, that's a problem. That's not really good
I
leadership."
think like if we're talking physical, standing on truth, provision, protection. Like, if I'm not physically able to do those things, I mean, literally stand. Like, if I'm not able to stand, like if you're supposed to preach on Sunday, and you're too weak at the knees to do it, like
It's simply based on your decisions,
I'm
not
right.
like somebody.
Listen.
and it's like, yeah, it's not an overnight thing.
Right,
It's a pattern of time.
I'm just top heavy, is all. All right. It's hard to stand.
I'm great at spinning.
My feet aren't big enough.
I think it's funny that you say that because I'm like, if someone were to apply for the job and they were mentally not well
And they weren't working on it.
and they weren't working,
They're just
on
like,
it,
no, this is just.
or if they were
mentally might be one that you don't care how much they're working on it. There has to be a level of mental.
sure,
Yeah.
or emotionally not well.
Can you imagine when I went into panic attacks and anxiety and I just said, this is how I'm going to stay?
No.
Shut down. I couldn't do anything. And
You'd-
I'm just
you'd
like,
be
no, I
dead
still
by
want to
now.
work here though.
Sure.
But I'm not going to come in.
But I'm saying if
Can't come
somebody
inside.
came to us with either
Can't
of
talk to
those,
people.
that would be a conversation where it's almost like everybody would go, yeah, that makes sense. If somebody came to us obese and we said, we think you're disqualified for ministry because you're too overweight,
And then he hands us the lawsuit.
our church would shut down.
Yeah, he hands us the lawsuit.
I'm realizing I think that's more cultural than anything else.
Right.
But somebody would shut us down.
I think the matter of effectiveness, it's your effectiveness and your testimony. I watched an interview on George Janko. It was actually with Brandon Lake. And he talked about
Which
he's
one's Brandon Lake?
He's one of a Christian artist.
Okay.
He's,
Gratitude and
just
Graves
made
Gardens.
a, just
Oh,
made
is he the hill, not Hillsong, but the one of the big elevation?
He's one of the
He's
major
elevation.
guys. I think so.
Blonde guy.
And big curly hair.
Yeah, good-looking blonde guy.
Yeah, yeah. And he talks about he got
Hallelujah.
saved.
He was cool.
He actually gave his life to Christ at a Power Men thing.
Did he really?
His dad was a pastor.
I started to listen to that one. I heard
and
that.
was friends with the people who ran that, and was like, hey, for one of his birthdays, they came over to the house and they did a whole performance and stuff. And he's like, dude,
Tore a
there's just
phone
something
book in
about
half.
it, man. It's like, yeah, like some massive dude ripping a phone book in half and going, do you give your life to Christ?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's kind of like the WWE kind of thing.
100%.
And it's like, if you were, I can see that, in WWE, you root for a champion. And it's like for Christ, he's our champion.
It's a very
So-
human thought to kind of. Everybody does it. You're trying to be attractional. It's attractional model in churches.
It's an attention
attractional.
getter.
But I do
Yeah,
think I think it can work to
It's
each
not,
their own.
It can't be. It's not that it would be completely ineffective. We're just
Right.
like, is it necessary?
But if you're devoting your life to Christ,
Is it okay?
and
It seems.
and I'm gluttonous and lazy, and then I feel my life is with Christ, and then I feel this conviction of what I'm eating or how I'm living and how I'm being lazy and not going out.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to do that. That's
what
not
if you're
living with Christ.
passionate about working out and you're saying, well, I'm doing this because this is the thing I'm into, and I'm just going to the community of people that. So Power Team is like, I'm into this. This is super cool. So it's very organic. It's not manufactured for them. They're like, no, this is super awesome.
No, and this
I
is
tell
why.
people about Jesus.
This is where I'm like, I feel like we've all landed on. You can work out and love working out and make it a big part of your life,
Make it
and
a
everything's
ministry.
fine, and your
Yeah.
spirituality is
Sure.
great. It's the flip side. That can you?
You want to bring that question back, huh?
I kind of want an answer. I feel like we never.
I see what
answer
you mean by the
questions.
flip side. I think it's more the matter of, we're supposed to glorify God in all things and everything we do. So if you're working out, why? Are you working out to glorify God? Are you working out to find opportunities to evangelize? Or are you working
That's
out?
so difficult.
So for me, I do
There's
it-
not one of us that actually works out and doesn't have some vanity involved.
Of course, and
there's
that's-
not one human in
that's
the world
totally.
Me, completely altruistic.
Yeah, and that's
altruistic. He's doing it for other people.
and I think
everybody else.
it.
I am benefiting all of you guys.
This is for you, sir.
And for me,
You're
it's like the motivation is started with not having chronic pain, and the reality of it is too is like, what would happen if I just every 3 weeks I'm like, guys, I can't serve, I can't be a part of this, I can't go to that because my back's out.
So
It's like, why don't you?
That
take
all
care of
makes sense, and there's
I still want to address.
I've done
Are you
physical
going to hire a
therapy.
morbidly obese person?
Exactly.
I just want to answer that question. I
I
don't want to
know.
talk about anything else.
You
I-
did.
Are you hiring them?
No,
I've done-
you
You
were,
did.
no, you were.
You did hire a morbidly obese person.
No, you're morbidly obese.
You're
You-
more
you-
muscle than all of us.
you weren't morbidly
That was
obese.
50 pounds ago.
Were you
But
really? Have you
muscle,
lost 50
though.
pounds since you've worked here?
I saw
Seriously?
the picture of you
Oh,
at
wow.
when Trey was young. That was
That was
you
That was 380 muscle.
you were
Yeah.
very very large person at that time.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was.
And would you have attributed that
0%.
weight?
He was 100% body fat.
100% body
That's
fat.
it's hard to believe.
no
but
blood,
it
no
is.
bone,
He
I just-
was just rolling in.
Now, would you have
Man.
attributed in that place?
50
would you have
pounds is
said, "I'm in a
insane.
good place spiritually, and I was in a good place emotionally"? Just asking.
At the time, I would have said yes. I was in a good place spiritually
Interesting, yeah.
because I was pastoring.
yeah,
In retrospect, no.
yeah.
That's interesting. And I wonder if the same is true now. You're going to look back
Years from now
in
and
4
go,
years from
yeah.
now and be like, I was in a terrible spot.
Yeah.
He mostly meant the church he was at.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
Terrible church.
I'm going to say yes.
I'm going to say if Floyd showed up looking like he did when I saw him in that picture, and he's this Floyd, I'd say yes.
Me too. That's why I'm like, especially when if someone were to show up and be like, hey, I was in a dark place and I'm working on it now. I'm go, yeah.
It'd be the thing that when we're all hanging out, it'd be the thing that we'd be helping each other with. Just that'd be his thing we're helping him with.
Yeah.
He'd be helping
Right.
me with something. It
Right.
would just be, that's what I'm saying. If it's this Floyd, I don't think I see it.
I
don't
would
think
be
it's
asking a lot of questions, which sounds rude to people, but I would be asking a lot of questions in the same way that if your finances were in shambles and you were in crippling debt, I'd be like, hey, spiritually, you're good, but we should talk about these other things because they hinder the rest of your life. They do. There's no way that if any of the big four are in disarray, that we're not burdened by the rest: spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional.
Floyd lost 50
that's-
pounds. All that has done is made me happy for you.
Yeah.
It didn't affect your job, didn't affect what I thought was effective, didn't think like, oh my gosh, now that you've done this, now you're really arrived spiritually and you're going to do a good job in
Exactly.
ministry.
No, but
I was happy for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how I saw it. Like, that's good for you. That's all that changed in that
Agreed.
50 pounds.
You see the potential for the abundance in their life. You
Yeah,
know,
man. Like, this is good.
Maybe that's it right there. Maybe Josh just nailed it. That's not God's best for you.
Yeah. And again, we all have that in different places.
It would be, it's
Josh doing more calf raises.
It
It's not God's
is-
best for you. How much bigger do you need those
I'm
calves?
calf raising right now.
I do feel like I'm doing another workout.
There's actually a small cow under the table.
Yeah.
Shh, it's okay.
I think it's presumptuous of us, however, to think that we know what God's best is for someone else. Not that we don't, and not that we can't help steer somebody. There are some obvious things that we would go, hey,
I think if they let you in, you can help with that.
agreed.
Yeah.
And if you
Totally
see
agree.
something that is manifesting as detrimental in your life, you could also say, hey,
Yeah, exactly.
this is like it's manifesting or
I
it's
think
affecting your
within
life.
bounds, I do think it is the role of a pastor to go to. Here's the deal: if you have joined a congregation and you're like, I'm part of this family, I think it is the role of a fatherly pastor to then go to certain and be like, hey, this is in love. It's just that I feel like that's what the evangelical movement did so poorly and really hurt a lot of people because it was like, hey, I don't like what you're wearing. I don't like the music you're listening to. And it's like, dude, mind your own friggin' business.
Yeah.
So there's this weird line of, but if you are asking for prayer every single week because you don't have enough money to pay your rent, it's kind of me to be like, hey, what can we all do together to help you,
You don't need,
with
you
this
don't need a
job?
miracle. You need discipline.
Yeah, right. Which is most of sadly, that's I think most of our issues is like we're praying for God to intervene, and God's like, oh, I've given you all the tools to take care of a lot of the problems that you're facing. So that's interesting. Okay. Muscular Christianity, we're all joining tomorrow. Sounds fun. Let's do this.
I'm out automatically.
All right, you're done?
They see me like, no. Wait at the door.
Their poster child is this dude who looks exactly like a Greek god statue. He's got like really curly hair,
Which is
a
ironic.
beard.
Totally ironic.
So he does a pose that's like this statue that I don't know who it is, but some Greek statue.
But he looks dirty.
He does. They like put ash all over him. You're like, I don't know what's going on. But that might be a symbolism of like
to the
covering an ash.
statue.
Maybe. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
the statue, like a statuesque.
Yeah.
Kind of.
But it
Well,
might even be like symbolism of covered in ash. It's probably
This
not.
is
It's
the
probably a
opening
statue.
banter.
I wonder
This
if
has
there's-
been
I
a
wonder if
great
there's a
episode. We got
yoga-
15 minutes left.
Let's
we want to
go.
do Would You Rather?
We have so much time.
I wonder if there's a yoga Christianity that you could be a part of, Josh.
Oh, maybe, but I wouldn't want to.
Let's get 20 to 25 minutes out. I'm going to let them know I'm running a little late.
Pilates Christianity.
They're going to watch this and go, that jerk.
I know. Well, I'm being honest because we are running
That's good.
a little late.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do a couple of
Well, we could look at.
stories.
Let's look at this one. This one looks
What's
fun.
going on in the modern world of 2023?
Hey, I heard a crazy
hey.
thing yesterday that is not spiritual at all.
Oh,
I was watching.
Was it the sermon
It was the
yesterday?
sermon.
You heard
that
in
too.
church?
I heard a couple of things. I was watching the Steelers game, and they're talking about Kirk Cousins came back from an Achilles injury. That it very rarely happens. The last time it happened was a quarter century ago. It was Trent Dilfer. I almost fell out of my chair. Trent Dilfer was a quarter century ago?
Yeah, that's
crazy.
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 Yeah, time flies. That's.
I was giving Josh time to find something.
Oh, we got
I've been on it.
stories. He's going to go
I've
right
been
to
on
the
it.
top story.
You want to talk about 5 American myths of successful churches and ministries?
Yeah, 100%. I want to talk about that
Wait,
so
say it
bad.
again?
Yeah,
What?
just
I don't
read the
even-
titles. Yeah, just read
All
it.
right.
Somebody wrote this, and I
No,
thought
this
it's an
is-
opinion piece, so
no,
let's
this
give our
is
opinion
exciting.
on their opinion.
So-
You know what's interesting is this actually is not a bad. It's kind of relating to our banter.
Right. So these are the things you're going to read are myths. They're not actual.
Yeah, they're saying this is not what makes a successful church.
Okay, let's
Read
hear
the
'em.
title again.
Let's hear 'em.
5 American myths of successful churches and ministries.
Okay.
Number 1, The size of the church shows success.
Oh, myth. 100%.
Yep.
Okay, wait.
Listen, Mr. Megachurch.
We all agree it's a myth, but I have heard from the time I started, before I was in ministry,
How are we defining success, by the way?
numerical size for sure.
Well, they're saying not numerical, so
Yeah.
that's one of the ways. That's the not.
But they're saying for them it is. I have heard forever that healthy things grow is the line I've always heard.
That's an evangelical
100%.
mega church.
And so if
Conference line.
you have a church and it's not growing, the implication is that it is not healthy.
What do you do with pruning?
Well, most churches aren't not growing because of pruning. So like just think about a church of even critical, they're saying big. How about small? You're at critical mass. It's about 100 in the average American church. 100 people can support a pastor, just one person. So that's about your number. And if it's been at 100 or under for 5 years.
Yeah, sure.
Then are we saying
Is that
that they are
successful? I'm
spiritually
just asking.
unhealthy?
There's a ton of variables too, because what if you're
Wait,
in
you
a
just said it was
town-
numbers and now it's spiritually?
What if you're a
No, I'm saying, is there a correlation? Because what they're saying is there is a correlation between the size of your church and read
Successful.
it again, and being successful, right? Isn't that what I heard?
The size
or
of the
no?
church shows success.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and success, that's what's funny.
Well, that's
is-
what
How do you
define.
define success?
Well, that's what we're
That's
going
what
to
I'm
do.
saying.
That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Is a 100-person church for 5 years successful?
if you're in a town of 500,
Yes,
We'll
it's
say
been
no,
around
you're
for
in
5
Chicago.
years.
We'll say in Chicago.
And if
no,
they're
we'll
all
say
saved?
you've been around for 40 years. This is just the past for the
Oh,
last
no.
5 years. So this is just the last 5 years.
this
Yeah.
is like his you won't hate it. He keeps adding caveats.
Yeah, I'm trying to get
I
you the
don't-
idea of like churches that exist out there. There are 100 people.
do you mean the vast majority of churches?
I was gonna
are
say, but
under
average
100
church
people?
how
member
is that not?
70.
The percentage that's
How is
under
that not?
100 is startling.
It's the vast majority of churches are under 100.
So, yeah, I can understand what you're saying. Like, over time, how have they not grown in that number? But also, they've maintained the number.
Sure. So forget about all the caveats of what if they're in a church of 10 or in a city of 10 people, then they're actually a huge church. Forget about it. And let's just go with a normal scenario. Is that possible?
Is that a healthy church?
Can you be successful, quote unquote, or a healthy church?
I would say successful.
Yes.
Sorry, I want to change the word.
Yeah.
So that's success.
For them, yes.
Okay. What do you think, Floyd?
It's hard. It's hard for me, and part of that could be the brainwashing of my youth. But healthy things grow, so there has to be some level of growth. You know, the Lord added to the church daily. There's all these passages that we could take out of context and point to make that true.
But we're looking at numbers. What if they've grown in their faith spiritually and the discipleship
the
for
church-
5 years
Right.
is impeccable?
But the church
Should
is
you
called
even
to
look at numbers
The
in that
church is
case?
called
Yeah.
to more than that, though.
Well, good.
We're called not to just are for and no more. As long as we go to heaven, we're cool.
I've not heard that one before.
That's not what
actually like
we're
it.
built for. The church is built for. It's the entire. One of the fundamental aspects of our denomination was built on, hey, shouldn't we do something?
I actually think you nailed it with the we have taken, evangelicalism took numbers, which are a good indicator of things like
I
health
used
and
to
success.
say they tell a story, not the whole story.
Yes.
They
So
tell a story.
those are an indicator. But a small church, you can't just throw that out and say, well, that's only one indicator. There's lots of other ones. Because, like you said, I think that was the best point. We were made as the congregation of believers that meet together, whether it's the church in Rome or the church in Fresno. You're made to proselytize. You're made to reach out and help the needy, which then in turn probably will, but is not guaranteed to stem numerical growth also,
So
right?
I would say
Sure.
I think it
Seems
has
like it.
nothing to do with it. The numbers have nothing to do with success.
Yeah.
Because if we, been around long enough in ministry to be like, man, this church is doing everything right. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're sharing Christ.
Hold
they're doing
on.
all these things.
Really?
Yeah.
You can think of specific examples because I was just thinking, I don't think I can. Think of actual examples.
I think that someone.
church?
I would say I would say
Our
people
church
would
has
look.
grown like crazy, though.
I think that people would look at our church
couldn't
and
find a seat
say,
yesterday.
I
Literally
think
couldn't
people-
find seats yesterday's service.
but there was definitely a year's window.
That was second service.
where people would say like, "Hey, how come this isn't growing more? How come this isn't doing
Agreed,
better?"
but you gave a 5-year window.
I know I gave 5-year window.
You
I
can
would say-
take any window of our 5 years existence because I think we've been around for 5
Okay,
years.
how about the?
I think we're about 5 years old.
I'll give one. I'll give one my own specific one, and I did the same thing in Chicago, and our church grew. I did the same thing in Fresno First, church grew. I did the same thing in L.A., and I saw 3 people come to Christ. Never
That's
got above 80.
growth.
Never got above 80. Never.
But that's growth.
How long?
3 is
How long
growth.
were you there?
5 years.
You were there 5 years. The
5
church
years.
never grew above 80.
And I shared the gospel. We did all things. I trained all the people in the same way. We grew deep. We really did. Like I grew. Everybody grew there, but we never got above that number. And I would say the best thing we did is we helped made room because there was an unchurched area. Is the next church that came in and met in the building we met in blew up 1,000 people. Did great. So
which I like because that's more of the kingdom
I think
mindset.
that's the outlier, and it's kind of the tip of the spear of the movie.
Yeah.
You know, where they go and they share the gospel, and the natives murder them, and then their
kids go
come back
No,
and
I
they
was
lead
gonna
them all to
watch that
Christ.
tonight. Thanks,
Oh,
buddy.
it's good. Spoiler alert. So I don't think I shouldn't say nothing. I don't think it is the indicator. I
Right.
do think it's an indicator.
I think
I'll
that's
go
the
with
case
that
for most things.
in the most normal ways because those same techniques did grow other churches.
I would also say though that like real estate, right? There are going to be ups and downs in the market.
Absolutely.
And I think, but any 10-year period, decade over decade, real estate is a sound investment because
The
there's
stock
growth,
market's the same thing.
Yeah.
Any 10-year span
including the Great Depression.
including the Great Depression, the stock market has grown. So,
Yeah.
and we would say that's indication of a healthy economy.
Mm-hmm.
So
would say if
I
you
would
get
actually
under-
probably say the same thing about church. Again, it's not the indicator,
Right.
but it is a pretty good litmus test.
I will say, I'll give another that LA experience. We got to the place where we were financially viable. We had a critical number, about 70, 80 people. We could meet and do everything. But even then, God called me away and actually felt like the Lord told me to say, "Hey, this is done."
Yeah, that's because
Because-
you weren't a Christian, though.
That's
so,
right.
and that's a totally different.
And I would say because you could say we can pay our bills.
yeah.
People are growing spiritually, so we should keep going. And I really feel like the Lord's like, well, that's actually not the
Yeah.
dynamic here.
Yeah.
Because part of the way that you are supposed to be as the church, we are supposed to be giving the gospel, the Great Commission.
And I wonder-
we weren't accomplishing that. We were
Yes.
just a gigantic small group.
And I wonder if that's
At that
because
point.
we tend to, as humans, fall back on our laurels and just say we're comfortable. And I think God, if you read Scripture, I was shocked when I realized years ago. I think I heard somebody say it. Every point through Scripture with how God dealt with every individual, He called them to discomfort. There's not one story where He let somebody sit in their comfort.
Right.
He always calls people into more, something different. Go to this distant land. Where? I'm not going to tell you yet.
you'll know when you
Go.
get there.
Like things like that is constantly pushing us. And so sometimes as a church, I feel like we do it all the time. We go, hey, things are really good. Let's just keep doing what we do. And
Right.
God goes, actually, what I want you to do is introduce a prayer time in the middle of service that might take 15 minutes.
That
and I'm
not
like,
everybody loves. I had somebody tell me, like, it's kind of a little awkward. I'm like,
Yeah.
you
And I
you know
had
what?
somebody
And it's
tell
actually
me
okay.
I had somebody tell me that's the most spiritual thing that the church has done
yeah.
yet.
And I would
That
agree
is
with
the-
that.
I agree.
I probably told you
And
that.
I think the awkwardness
Yeah.
is.
I wasn't gonna say
I
that.
think the awkwardness is solved by participation. That's my personal take
100%.
on it.
It's
the
weird.
non-participation that makes it feel awkward.
Nobody coming up for prayer they're like, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And it's stuff like that I feel like God will always, if your pastor has a mind and an ear towards God, your church is going to change a lot all the time. Because I'm like, God doesn't let us sit around.
Yeah.
He doesn't. He always pushes us.
I think
That's why we change a lot.
with the intention
that's,
of
that's what I was alluding to.
and that obedience, and it's hard not to measure it by numbers, where we open that time
It
and,
is.
and no one walks up,
yeah.
I would say
but
too.
still it's beneficial.
I would
Yeah,
say
you're
too,
right.
in like the overall church number, if you are in a position, because we're all pastors, if you're in a position and you're doing something for 5 years and there's no change, I think it behooves you to say, "Hey, is this what I should be doing?" Do you know what I mean? Like at minimum,
months.
I've been
I was going
walking.
to say I've got about 3 months before I'm questioning my entire
minimum,
life.
you should be like, Lord, if you're only unless from the Lord specifically telling me, keep going in this.
And if you say that, then I'm like, I'm on board
Fine.
100%.
But you should, if you're not even questioning, like, no, this is
I
fine.
can't think of many things that I've consistently done and that haven't changed.
Well, most churches,
5
believe it or
years.
not,
right.
they actually don't. I mean, we're giving some very specifics. Like, usually,
agree.
if you're not growing or shrinking, that's not a biblical concept. That's just the way the world works.
Well, or
It's either moving one
the
direction
idea
or
if you're not
moving
moving forward, you're backpedaling. That's
And if you're literally a church
you're
where
coasting,
you're
you're
not
going
bringing people to
downhill.
Christ, you are slowly aging out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is you're
And thank you
dying.
for the building.
You're going to die off.
I wasn't going to say it.
Oh my gosh.
So, okay. So, number one, we do say is a myth, but there are a lot of caveats with it. So
I
good.
agree.
That was
Number
exciting.
2, the amount of budget shows success. The amount of the budget.
So we're going with success.
Those feel almost the same.
I think as long as it's proportional
People
to
don't-
inflation.
People don't always identify money though, because you can have a church of 700 homeless people and the pastor has to work full time and pay the light bill.
And I would say
You're absolutely right, and that would be an amazing church if God's moving. That's
Yeah.
the thing where I'm like,
There are
if
ministries that
God
do.
is
So
moving,
we're going to get to the end of these 5 things, and the answer is going to be if God's moving, it's good.
Yeah,
If
okay, but
he's
I'll
not,
give you
it's
another
not.
one, though. So sorry to be so anecdotal about it, but the reality was at one point, my church at Encounter, 600 or 700 people, and we couldn't pay our bills.
right?
That's not a sign of health.
Well, you
so we
shouldn't
want to
have
call
had $1
something
million
successful.
lead pastor role.
That's right. And so I don't know if you want to call it successful. I would say it's unhealthy. So God was doing some great stuff in some areas, but really unhealthy in other areas.
Yeah, and I've been in churches of 4,000 where we were having massive budget trouble. So I'm like,
And I was in a church of about 125 that all the bills were paid, the
Money in the
property was
bank.
paid off,
Yeah.
$100,000 in the bank, and I had a good salary.
yeah, which is, so I would say money is virtually no indicator.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Virtually
say-
no. However,
If you're a
I
good
would-
steward, though.
it's
but
probably
there
an
is
indicator
that like,
of
how do we have
maturity.
700
Stewardship,
people?
yeah.
Because we clearly aren't. Which then I would say we're not discipling our people well. Then
right.
we're clearly
And
not
Good.
Frankly, we have grown in that. We've learned and grown in the past few years.
Absolutely, yeah.
In regards to that stewardship. Number 3, the celebrity status of the leaders shows success.
Yes,
obviously.
clearly.
I think that is the biggest. Truthfully, I think that is the biggest shortcoming of the modern Western church.
Unpack what you think
today.
they mean by that. So,
Is
because
that-
not every church actually has, actual celebrity, but a celebrity mentality.
So exactly, and I don't necessarily mean worldwide celebrity like the Joel Osteens and that type,
You're talking
the
about,
Stephen Furticks,
I wanted to tag Hoyer, and you got me a...
that dude.
That's the guy.
love that video.
It's where you in your church, you have become such a celebrity that people treat you in a way that's not respectful and holy. It's in a way that is clearly, again, celebrity versus respect and honor. I think that's one of the worst things that I see in the church. There's a meme that went around that Ashley shared with me that was this guy was being interviewed, and it was a skit. It wasn't like a real thing, but the guy's like, man, your church is the fastest growing church in America. Like, this is amazing. What are you going to do next? What's your thing? And he's like, well, most likely have an affair. And it's like,
I've seen those.
It's
You have this many albums. You've collaborated with this.
Exactly.
You're growing this way. He's like, I'm going to deconstruct.
Deconstruct, yeah.
And you'll see comments like Corey Asbury and other artists and pastors are just like, this is hilarious or something like that.
Because that's the trend we see. Because that I don't think we're supposed to. One of the main tenets of Christianity is humility.
Yeah.
And if everyone is telling you you're amazing all the time, you start to believe it.
Sure.
Well,
You've
then
got
it's
a problem.
and then you have that false humility, and that's probably one of the unhealthiest
man,
things.
no.
Another
thanks.
another thing is like guys that hang out in the green room both before and after service that
They're
they never
smart.
interact with the people.
They're smart.
Before service, I
figured it
get
out.
it. Like when I was pastoring, because
You're trying to get your head around the sermon. And all
small
that.
church, yeah. I don't want
I do
to talk to
that.
37 people.
Yeah.
But after church, you're approachable.
Oh,
After church, I made myself available, but I wouldn't before service.
It's funny because I would say that's fine. I wouldn't judge anybody for doing that, but I would say the
I'll do it
healthiest
enough for both of us.
The healthiest version of a pastor is like, I've already given my time to the sermon, and I've given it to the Lord, and now my job is to is to shepherd a flock of people.
Sure.
And if I separate myself, even if it's before a sermon so that I can prepare this sermon, I'm probably putting a little too much weight on my performance than I am.
100%
And then how much time is that? You're talking about 15
100%
minutes?
it
You're
was.
talking about, you
Sure.
know, 30, 40 minutes before the church sermon, you're going out there and hanging with
Right.
people. There's probably an amount of time that's
Well, we had 15
individual.
minutes between Sunday school and the service.
There you go.
I think that would the pastor would have to determine that, and if
Yeah.
the pastor is like, "Look, God is telling me to do this,"
Right.
yeah, I
Or
said it
go and
again.
hang out with people.
I'm going back
No,
to
it's
God.
nice for you, though, because somebody can say something that would totally derail you, and you forget by the time you get to the front of church.
Totally. Yeah, I really do.
I don't have that.
It's
I don't
funny.
mind.
I remember when I was raised in Lutheran church, my dad and my family was pretty involved with setting up services and other, everything going on throughout the church year.
Laundering money.
And and I remember, I don't know why this is bouncing around, but I remember during the service, I asked my dad something about like, why can't I go, like, why don't we sit closer? Like, why can't we just sit right next to the pastor as he's preaching? It's like, why do we have the pews? Why is there this
Interesting.
the
Why can't I
pulpit?
sit
Was
like
he on the
pastors?
Why
stage?
is there this? There
Was
was
he
a
on the
pulpit.
stage?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a
And
it wasn't a
it-
stage. It was a
with the-
pulpit with the
Chairs.
and you have just the sacristy and everything. It was just like, why? Like, what's the separation for? If he just preached about, there was no separation anymore, and so it was just the idea of like, and he's like, why are you asking that? I said, because the moment service is over, we're cleaning stuff. We're walking up there to clean stuff up.
Yeah.
Like, so what's the difference? Is it? And he's like, it's a matter of respect and etiquette and and tradition and that I can understand for people how that's causes, maybe causes church hurt or causes some tension because it's like,
Church.
I can't approach you.
Church.
I want to approach you, and then when there's opportunity, you're gone.
Yeah, it's good. We actually had a family this Sunday sit in the front row where the pastors normally sit, and I was so happy. I thought, why don't more people do that?
Yeah,
I
that
would-
was awesome.
The front row,
'Cause
like,
Josh
it's not
spits.
reserved for us.
I
You know
do.
what I mean? Like we'd actually give up our seats and we'll
It's the
sit
splash
somewhere
zone.
else.
Do you think it's odd? This has always been an odd thing to me. Where you sit in the church has nothing to do with anything. You can sit in the very back, the very front. You're in church. There is something that feels different when I sit in the front and when I sit in the back.
It's like a classroom.
I feel like I'm paying
can't
more attention.
figure it out.
Too distracted.
But the music feels, and this sounds weird. It genuinely feels, I'm not saying this is true, please don't misconstrue this. It feels more spiritual the closer you get to the front.
It does.
There's something about like it's more,
Well,
you're more immersed in it.
You're closer to
versus
the
separate.
source.
Yeah,
right?
it's so weird.
I think
Are you
we
calling yourself the source?
No, I'm
Yes,
just saying,
100%.
like we're trying to do what we can to strengthen our relationship to the source of our life and our faith, and our salvation.
Which
so
again is Josh in this scenario. I like where you're going.
I can understand how that can correlate to the physical, and
it's
to
interesting.
Yeah, you're just drawn to it like
you're
a
drawn-
moth.
right.
You are. You're kind
And
of like, I want to go
I don't
want to
say there's a correlation, but there just
But I
feels
think
like
the
there is.
correlation is similar to like how we are with our families and with classrooms. Like when it's like your parents are like, hey, come here, I want to talk to you, as opposed to like, hey, can you go pick that up? There's something that's more. There's the accountability.
Yeah. Every
Like,
time
now
my
that
dad
I'm in
would
the
say,
front.
"Come here, I want to talk to you," I'd be like, "Okay."
Bob and weave,
Oh,
Bob and weave, boy.
So back to the original. Oh, go ahead.
I get more distracted in the back. The further back I am, the
Isn't
more
that
distracted
weird? I do
am.
too.
There's like a sweet spot too. Like if I weren't speaking, there's a spot where I want to be close enough, but I don't necessarily want to draw attention to myself. Like there's a little bit I don't want to sit in front to be like I'm the good kid who sits up front. Like
Yeah.
there's that little mix.
So
I like where we sit because I'm looking straight down an empty aisle to you guys.
It's funny.
And so it makes
That's
it
where
easy.
Ashley sits right by you, and I like that. If there's something about that spot I do like,
Well,
that and the other side has that same kind of.
It is interesting. You look at like concert or even games. There are certain sections, front row, center stage, or if you're in, nosebleeds are cheaper than
Yeah.
for everything. It's like the farther you are from the source or from the.
But that also builds the celebrity the question, right? Where you're feeling
that's
like
what
I
I'm
want
saying.
that you're like I'm drawn to
It is
the celebrity
interesting.
of
It
that.
is interesting. That's like, well, it's going to cost you more.
Yeah.
And like for us, I think of all places, I think we're supposed to be like, no, it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah,
Well, we should
There's
charge
nothing
more
that
for the
bugs me
front
more when people dote over the pastors. I really, it is. I have a visceral response when people do that to any
I
one
love
of
that you
I-
have a visceral response to
It
that.
is. It really.
I think
it
it's
makes
as
me so
human
mad.
as it gets to want to
I do
accept
too.
all that praise to be the celebrity, and I think it's just on us to say like, "Hey, I'm just like you." That's all. I just have a different role. I think that's the challenge of it. I think it's super normal. I think it's normal for them to be like,
I do too.
You've changed my life. It's like transference in counseling, but now it's in preaching.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know me so well. I'm like, I just met you.
Yeah.
And I preached a
What's your
sermon.
name
That's the
again?
Holy Spirit.
So that's my problem.
That's the Holy Spirit talking to you. That is not me. I don't know your story. And I think as long as we can say, I think it's all super normal, and it just puts it on the pastor or the whichever one it is, worship, preaching, whatever, to just be like, no, I'm in this with you. Like there's no difference. Great.
Yeah.
Can we hang out on Friday? No.
No.
That's how Christ
Not
was.
unless you're buying cigars.
I mean, it's like
Then we're good.
Is it part of that? Maybe the childlike faith, where it's like we just want to be closer and to the word and to the music and all those things. Not necessarily the person. It is just the matter of like, maybe I have bad eyesight. And it's like, I want to see their face, and it's like,
So that's a heart issue.
we
as
don't want to
well.
be hindered.
Yeah.
We don't want to be hindered by, and sometimes that physical distance can kind of feel like a hindrance.
So I think that's
eyesight
definitely
is
a
a
myth.
heart issue.
Definitely a myth.
Eyesight is a heart issue.
Eyesight is, yeah.
Major.
All right, it's good. We got a
I mean,
little bit
number
left.
4.
Yes,
I mean, I'm
Rob.
legally blind. So.
Yep.
It's a good
Further
movie.
proving our
It's a
point.
good movie.
Exactly,
The title of the leader shows success.
I like this one. I thought this was
The
good.
title of the leader, man.
Shut up, Floyd. Shut up.
So you have a preacher, but not a pastor.
Yeah. So this is
I
interesting.
think it's like I think they even mean like
There have been-
lead pastor,
Yeah.
executive
Well,
pastor.
there have been
worship
denominations
pastor.
too that have changed the identifying word from like reverend to bishop.
yeah.
Even the Church of God of Cleveland did that several years ago, which is super weird to me. Like,
Or from pastor to apostle.
like it used to be.
Yeah.
I can't remember the first stage, but there was like certified, licensed, ordained, and they went from like the pastor, apostle, bishop.
Bishop, man. That one's weird. I have said my whole life that titles don't matter, and I think now titles matter.
Jesus is the Christ.
I think
Say Jesus is
I
Lord.
still want to be called bishop.
people don't need to call you by your title, but there is something. And I'm just going to say this. I think it's more vocational. There are certain instances where having your title helps the scenario.
Dr.
Yes.
Ogle.
It's as I say, like being. I was gonna say like being a
100%.
medical doctor.
Yeah.
Walking in the room, being like, "Hi, I'm Doctor So and So." Like everybody's like, "Okay."
I'm gonna listen to him.
Yeah,
versus
that's right.
I'm nurse so and so. There's a different. I mean, there just is, right?
Yeah, it's just different, yes. And so even like I always say, weddings and funerals, I go by Pastor Joe, because at this point,
Well-
I need you to just kind of. This isn't a discussion.
Have you ever told someone or asked someone to call you pastor?
Oh, nope, I just introduced myself, and at weddings and funerals as Pastor Joe. Everywhere else, I'm Joe.
What's
In
funny
this,
is
I'm Pastor Joe.
So you introduce yourself as
Yeah.
pastor.
I've told people
What's
not to call me pastor.
I have to, and
Many,
it's
many
not
times,
nice.
yeah.
I felt guilty about it afterwards.
Did you?
Yeah. I think one thing that we do here is like none of us will ever refer to ourselves as pastor, but we refer to the other person as pastor.
Yeah, that's honoring.
Like we do that.
It's
Yeah,
not,
we do
it's
that.
not
It
about
is.
us. It
Publicly.
is, and I do want people to respect you and honor you. And so we're talking about titles. We actually do value titles here. That is something.
That's what I was saying. I wouldn't have said that in the past. Now I do think
It helps
They
peop-
are important.
it helps people follow. Like they know that you've been commissioned by this church as the leader, not even globally, just in this local body. We've
It's just how
commissioned
we're
you.
designed. We having that structure, for Moses and his 70 elders, for the people, there has to be that organization. As for measuring success, I don't see how that's.
I don't know if
that's-
I would say there has to
It's
be
not
because
for the church. That's a
because
weird spot.
I know people who are not ordained, who are not part of a church as far as in leadership, who are having greater kingdom effect than some pastors. So I'm like,
but that's what I guess I said that wrong. But there's leadership. There is a distinction
For
between
sure.
leadership and
Yeah,
those
yeah.
who are
and
following.
that's for no one to determine other than the people around you.
Yeah.
It's for them to determine.
This
Right.
question sounds like an internal observation as opposed to an external. Nobody's looking at the church and talking about the titles of the leadership. I think that's a vocational question, which is weird. It seems off to what we're talking about. Whereas, do people feel successful with different titles in ministry?
Yeah.
That's what this is really.
Which I would say there-
externally people aren't really asking.
There
that
is a
question.
difference, and I can say this personally, and this is just anecdotal, but moving from a teaching pastor role to a lead pastor role was a shift with me, where I was like, oh, that's because when I was a teaching pastor, I just came in and I taught, and it was great, and I loved people. And then when I became a
went back to
lead
the green
pastor,
room.
I literally went and got counseling immediately because I'm like, well, it just was different.
Was it more responsibility?
It felt, and that's what I'm saying. It felt like to me, all of a sudden, I went from the guy who teaches the Bible, which is a huge role, and I get that. But lead pastor became this, I'm now a shepherd of a large flock. Yeah. That matters. It was different for some reason.
He still has imposter syndrome. Let's go to the next question.
Yeah. And the very last one, the affluent lifestyle of the leader shows success. Oh, goodness.
Whoa.
That's hilarious.
That was not
I'm
me.
back. It's funny because I would.
Just trying to mess with you.
Isn't it funny that I would probably say in reality, the opposite is probably true? The more affluent that pastor's lifestyle is,
cultural.
The worse it probably is.
If you go to an all-black church, we've all been part of something like that. Mm-hmm. It is actually, culturally, forget anything spiritually. Mm-hmm. That seems to matter in a big way. Then you go to a predominantly Caucasian church, and it seems to matter so little. In fact, it would shame you.
It is the opposite.
If you pull in with a nice car, like, where's that coming?
They want to see
happening about that.
And I've never understood that. Both sides of those, I think, are a problem. Whereas we want our pastor to be so affluent that it's like, I'm like, that actually hurts the testimony. And then we want our pastor to basically be in poverty. And I'm like, well, also hurts that, like, come on. There's a happy middle ground. I don't know what that number is the problem.
2 job scenarios, one I took, one I didn't. Both had a person in the interview upset when they found out what I was going to be making. And by the way, it wasn't a lot. It was just more than them. That was the only issue.
That's why you only put wealthy people on your
really
board.
Weird.
Or honestly, but the other is true also. That I've been in scenarios where the board is so wealthy that individuals who are incredibly successful financially, and they're like, we got to get you a raise. Like, this is insane. How do you live on? And I'm like, well, actually pretty well. Yeah. But to them, it's weird.
Yeah.
So both sides of that is interesting.
It's weird to call. Sorry, it's just weird to call these myths. It's like, no, it's not a myth. That is something that people think.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I think that's why it's a.
I could say like
it doesn't feel like a myth. It feels like, is this a problem?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
not like a myth.
Which version of this in your church is a problem? Because our church is probably right in the middle.
Because by definition, like a myth, like who thinks that? Like I don't know, but someone does.
No, and I think that's what they're saying is that people think it's true. When
think of Stephen Furtick. Think of Stephen Furtick.
Then I would just say it's false.
Yeah. Like a Stephen Furtick is like your classic, like
his what was it, $20 million home, $12 million home?
Does that mean
it has nothing to do with his church income?
Yeah. Well. That was one of the big critiques was he said that from the pulpit. It has nothing to do with the church. It was from sales of my books, to which people said, but you sold 20,000 copies to the church. The church bought 20,000 copies and paid you that, and then you gave them away in your church. So he's like, it's absolutely the church's dime. And so there was a lot of...
Well, if he only sold 20,000 copies, that would be... But that's a fraction of what he sold.
This feels more like church health.
That number might be off. I don't know.
Can your church support your pastor? That feels more like the right question. It's church health. Whatever, if you're living in Boston versus living in Fresno, very different, but you're like, it's more like church health. Can you guys actually support your pastor?
If the board approached you and said, we want to buy 500 copies of your last book, and then we want to distribute those to the church, is that okay?
Yeah.
I think if the board approaches
are you selling them? Or you said distributing?
The board pays you retail.
If they feel led to do that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be okay. Again, that'd have to be them, like saying, like, we think this is beneficial to the church.
Is it the last Qumranian?
Well,
that's not beneficial.
No,
to anybody. Hurt the church.
They did approach me.
But it was
1,000 copies.
I would like to say that if the board approached me, I'd say, just take the books. I'm gonna donate those.
This is a classic thing with you, though. Yeah. But would you allow Joe to donate 500 to 1,000 books if the board was the one making the approach? And you can say whatever you want, but I know the answer is no, you wouldn't. You just insist that Joe be paid for that because you are going to err on the side of caution for you. You're going to give them away, but not expect anybody else to give them away.
That's probably true.
You built the sign.
Especially for yourself.
You built our sign for free.
If I wrote a book that was like familial theology, and you were like, dude, everybody in our church needs to read this. That's the difference, right? Is you're like, Les Qumranian's a fictional book. Right. It's fun. Right. Nobody needs to read. But if we one of us writes a theology book that we're all like, everybody should read that. You know what I mean? Like I could see the board saying we see this as beneficial, but that's such a niche.
I still think like even if these are myths or problems, it's like the concept of sitting there and measuring the success of churches. Number one, it sounds like someone who doesn't go to a church. or
it's probably true.
It sounds like someone who's been burned.
Yeah.
And there's matters of, I mean, they're probably, I mean, they even reference Matthew 23, so they're staunchly on, like, all these churches are, you know, the Pharisees of today.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can see validity to that, but isn't it wiser, as opposed to just sitting at home and writing an article, to go there and talk to them?
Yeah.
You may have little voice, it may make little impact, but it's just like, what good does that do? You're not.
Well, did you go to the one and the few before you took it to the masses? I guess is the question.
Right.
All right. I've got time for a would you won't hate it. No.
Okay. Would you rather fight a grizzly bear with a 9mm or 2 pit bulls with a spoon?
I have the grizzly bear and the 9mm.
What do you think?
It was a grizzly with a 9.
Is it just the bullet, no gun?
And
No.
Here you go.
I don't even know if a 9mm
No.
will penetrate the pelt.
I think it'll
you can take a
penetrate
bear
it.
down with an arrow.
Yeah, it'll penetrate it, but you got to hit it right. You got to go in the face.
Well, first of all, too, their heart pumps so slowly that a lot of people they find the dead hunter and the dead grizzly bear, because the grizzly bear, you could shoot him in the heart, he won't know he's dead for a very long time because his heart pumps so slowly. So just some information about grizzly bears.
I don't know about 2 pit bulls with a spoon. If they're they're grabbing both my arms.
Yeah. What good
The
is
spoon is.
gonna
I just
do?
dropped the spoon.
honestly, the spoon is worthless to you
Yeah.
at that point. It really is. With 2, I don't know if you can beat.
How useful is the spoon with
Yeah.
one?
I don't know. Well, with 1 at least, unless you just got to get to the eye. I think we shouldn't talk about murdering animals on the podcast. I just realized.
We're talking about defending ourselves.
But I'm going to pick the 9 with the bear.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is you're in massive trouble in either one of these scenarios.
You have to be really
You're in
good
serious
either way.
trouble.
I'm dead either way. I'm seeing Christ.
Hold on, I had one that was a good one. That was a fun one.
Yeah.
You're given $10,000 and you have to spend it in 2 hours. What do you do?
10,000's not as much as it used to be.
Right. What do you do?
Can you invest it?
Can you do anything wrong with it?
You have to spend it.
Invest.
Can you pay a bill?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd probably call my parents and see where their mortgage is at.
Oh, all right,
Okay.
all right. Parent.
If I can't invest it for my own rent or anything, it's like, yeah. Or, you know what, I'd probably work with Taylor on getting her another car.
you can buy. You buying anything.
Yeah.
So if it's a down payment on a house, if it's towards your
Not
rent,
enough for a house here.
I'd pay down a car.
you pay down a car.
Yeah,
too.
immediately. Just pay down
off
a car. Yeah, actually, at this point, one it'd
Pay off a car and buy a motorcycle.
It'd actually pay off one of my cars.
And I'd get you guys a nice cigar.
I was going to say I would just buy cigars. So
There you go.
That's
10
not-
G's in
that's not a
cigars.
bad idea.
It's just a lot of cigars.
On that note, thanks for joining us on You Won't Hate It. I'm Josh.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Floyd.
I would choose the 9mm also, and I'm Joe.